So that does cause me to just say one more sort of foundational thing as we launch this conversation. And that is how we reason with a non-believer. I heard you say a minute ago that it's sometimes, startling, off-putting. Those probably aren't the right words. It'll shake you up a little bit to have somebody expose their competing idea, and you maybe feel like, you in the Rolodex of your mind, you're trying to spin through like, what is the answer here? And that's, we're going to try to do a lot of that. Hopefully you and everyone will feel like really, really well equipped. But I do want to share my philosophy for reasoning and having those conversations. You said a minute ago something that's 100% true, so I'm not conflicting with what you said. You said in order for us to have these conversations with confidence, we have to have confidence in the gospel itself. Like, we have to understand and believe and hold as true the things that we are taking in Bible study, in church, in our quiet time, in our prayer time, in our study time. We have to have a firm foundation of faith. Of course, that comes from the Bible, good Bible teaching, preaching. Our firm foundation comes from understanding who God is, who the person and work of Christ. And that is best understood in the context of a Christian church, the Bible. Okay. That is all true. However, one, I think, fatal mistake that Christians make when they enter these conversations is they start from inside the Bible.
Right. I agree with you.
And when you're talking to someone who doesn't believe in the Bible, you can't start from inside the Bible. I mean, I had a friend I was talking to about these tools that I've sort of developed. I mean, I didn't really develop them. All people who do apologetics well have some version of these tools. This was my journey of like, okay, this is my anchor. And when I talk about disarm and deconstruct, that's helpful for me. There's even a reason I made them the same to let, you know what I mean? I need something that I can remember, because it's hard to keep your thoughts organized when someone's peppering you with difficult questions. So these tools that I use are all starting. This is my philosophy. It all has to start really outside of the Bible. You have to start from, it's like in a house. Someone's out walking on the sidewalk and I want to bring them into the house. Am I going to stand in my house with all my doors and windows shut and just yell for them to come into my house? Or am I going to walk outside of my house, meet them on the sidewalk, and develop an invitation that's enticing to them to bring them into the house? Like, I can't be with you in the house until you've come into the house with me. And I can yell at you from inside the house, but you're not going to hear me. You might not even see me. And at the end of the day, you have no reason, no desire to come into the house. Like, that's not your house.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's a fatal flaw for us to start with, oh, here's what. So I was talking to, I lost a thread there. I was talking to a friend a while ago, talking about these tools that I was kind of kicking around with him. And I was like, here's what I was thinking. I think, this could be easier for people. And I have this idea. And he was like, so I said, what would you say if someone said to you, why is there evil in the world? Which is, let's be honest, I think it's the hardest question.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I would say that Adam and Eve, and I was like, and I let him go through it. He said, but then there's sin, and that sin entered the world, and so that's why we live in a broken world. And I was like, okay, I don't believe in the Bible. So that landed on deaf ears to me. And I think to a certain degree, it alienated us.
I would say made you seem a little kooky, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to ask that person a question anymore. Yeah.
Because they don't believe yet. And actually there are parts in scripture that tell us don't do that. Don't argue with them. They don't believe what you believe. They don't see what you see. They don't have what you have. And so when, the Great Commission and all the things that in the Bible that tell us to go out and make disciples, it's important to figure out the how of that. Part of the how is understanding that person, not just beating them with what you were told in church, but listening to them, uncovering what is your competing idea. Because if you don't believe in something, if you don't believe in A, it's because you probably believe in B. Or you don't believe in anything. And there's plenty of people that's true of, that they just haven't explored it.
Yeah.
They just don't care.
Yeah.
I had a friend once who is a adamant atheist. I guess she would call herself an agnostic.
Okay.
And I said to her once, we just got into the conversation, and I said, well, what about this? And what about this? And she said, well, I guess I just don't feel like I have to have all the answers. And it was very reductive to me. But it's also true. She's just like, okay. I mean, she accepts that there's some things you're not going to know. And whatever. Live your life according to your own set of ethics and your own set of rules. And that's how you do it. And so there's a lot of even agnosticism, what she would believe, or atheism. She would say there is no God. So there's atheism there. Which, by the way, is an answer she felt the need to have.
Yeah.
But even in all those competing ideas, there are silos. So that's what I'd like to kind of talk through. Is there anything you want to add to sort of the foundational introduction?
Well, just even the idea of really what you were speaking of, and it's, I'm older. So I'm very much like, oh, our generation did it better in this generation, and so I wholeheartedly admit that. But what I do love about the upcoming generation, right, the 30s and younger, is their sense of, I want to say sense of community, but I'm going to pull back from that. Their sense of recognizing emotions, right, because there's more. They're trying to find a greater understanding of who they are, what makes them tick,
and the people around them.
Right. And what I love about that, and I wholeheartedly believe that is also what God wants us to know. Right. And so there's some truth in that. We've probably left a lot of that out in the prior generations, and they're coming up and they're finding an understanding in themselves. And for us, that's a beautiful opportunity to use that to speak to them. Yep. Right. Like, so we can't hold out and go, well, this is fact and this is right and this is wrong, because we process things so much differently. And now they're starting to understand how they process it. I can't tell you how many personality tests I've done through my kids doing it through school. And so they're starting to recognize that they're an IFTP or whatever, whatever it might be. And so then I can go, oh, my son is an IFTP. I'm making up these letters. They're not really existing letters, but whatever he is, he's a whatever this is. And so I know that opens a door for me to speak to him in this way, right? So then me as a believer, it's my responsibility to speak to him in that way. And so I appreciate that recognition, and I wish that we would take some of that and bring that into our conversations.
So it's interesting what you're talking about, because what you're exposing is there's even I was talking about the competing ideas, and you're even talking about there are generational gaps that we have to bridge to have really compassionate conversations. I agree with you.
Some of those competing ideas, I also believe, come from some of the way in which the way I see God is the way my brain processes people around me too.
Well, and generationally, I don't know about you, but I have a 22-year-old, she'll be 22 next week, and a 19-year-old. And one of the things they get the most jammed up on is LGBTQ issues. And so I think it's interesting to to understand generationally, the objections might be different.
Yeah.
I wish I had the study in front of me, but I don't. So I'm going to just do my best from memory. But I read a study recently that said that Gen Z has less of an issue with the problem of sin and more of an issue with biblical ethics and morality, because they recognize that the world is a broken mess. For them, that's easy. Whereas other generations are bootstraps generations saying, I don't need, there's nothing wrong with me. So I think you're exposing something that's helpful. But I also wonder if you would agree that even inside each generation, there are people who have those different presuppositions of like, yeah, I recognize sin is really a thing, or no, I really am more of a bootstraps person. And we will explore that when I talk about the tools, because there's a universality to the tools. Yeah. And just as a sort of a precursor, the foundation for the tools to get through these conversations is really asking good questions. And one of the ways that I explain it is when you're pressed with a question, ask a better question. And even though we were all raised not to answer a question with a question, when you're pressed with a question that's a difficult question, find a better question. So even though I don't know about you, but I was always raised, don't answer a question with a question. I would debunk that in this situation. Here's an example. My nephew was grappling with his faith, and he worked with a lot of atheists who have these little, they love to use these little, well, what about this? And so he came to me and said, I mean, he was really struggling with this question. He said, can God create a rock even he can't lift? And I've
gotten that question before.
And I said, gently over time. My first question was, why are you asking this question? Is this like the be all end all for you? I mean, where are you in the spectrum of faith? Because I knew that he had been raised in the church. So before I rush in with an answer to that, and there is an answer to that, before I rush in with an answer to that, I want to ask better questions. Like, why are you asking me that question? That was another one that okay, spoiler alert. The better question is, can God create? Because then you get to have a conversation about who God really is, and it's not really about the rock.
Yeah.
So we can tackle that question in the next series. But these are questions that people get jammed up on. I remember when gay marriage was like a political hot button, and people were voting for and against candidates. This was probably 10 years ago now, based on whether they would approve gay marriage as a legal whatever. And I mean, I think pretty much everybody who knows me knows that I'm a Christian, and I got that question a lot. Like, do you believe in gay marriage? And I'm like, why do you care what I think about that? That was my question.
Yeah.
Not because I knew they were trying. Sometimes a person's trying to trap you.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want to get into a fight. And so instead of me jumping in with my soapbox and all my whatever armament, I just asked a different question. Like, why do you care what I think about that? Like, what are you looking for in this conversation? Are you looking to understand my biblical beliefs? Are you really looking for that? Or are you looking to develop some belief system of your own? Or are you just thinking that I'm one of those Christians who hates people who disagree with her, and you want to nail me on that? Let's just be honest with each other. If you're asking me a question like that, that's about my belief system, let's first set some ground rules. What exactly is this conversation about?
Yeah.
And I'm down to have whatever
Sure.
those conversations
Right,
are.
but what's your agenda?
But I'm not walking in blind.
Yeah.
That's not fair to me. And it doesn't give me the opportunity to give you the most honest answer, the most authentic answer that I can. So that's ask a better question is one of my big ones. But in order to do that, you have to kind of understand foundationally what's happening in the conversation. Okay, so we talked about the state of Christianity. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about cultural Christianity. I referenced the couple in the video that partners with this series. So now we're going to talk about cultural Christianity a little bit. And I want to just banter that about a little bit because in the previous episode, we talked about the state of Christianity. We talked a little bit about the couple in the video that partners with this series, with this book, who, when asked, said they were Christians, but then couldn't really define what Christianity was. And so I use the word inoculation because I think it was Tim Keller, who is a king, who really mentions it. It is on the video, but I wrote it in its full quote in the book. I'm going to take the facilitator's liberty to read this section of the book because I think it'll set the table for the conversation. And I'm on page 26. So Tim Keller says, America is perhaps the most challenging mission field yet because no one has ever had to evangelize on a large scale a society that used to be Christian. Certainly, there have been many times in the past when the church was in serious decline and revitalized the faith and society. But in those times, society was still nominally Christian. So I want to talk about what nominally Christian means. There hadn't been a wholesale erosion of the very concepts of God and truth and of the basic reliability and the wisdom of the Bible. Things are different now. I'm going to stop there. Okay. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Pick it apart a little bit.
Well, so seeing other areas. So I feel like I bring this up all the time as well, but having some ability to go into other countries, Lebanon was one of them, and it was a key. I went there and for a Christian mission trip, and to see that there is growth there, right? There are some pockets that are shooting up, and to see here just what feels to me as it's stagnant. And even you had brought up in our last episode in COVID how during that time, people actually left the church, which in the past, 9/11 was a perfect example. The church exploded. And so in times of great fear, people had run to the church. And yet in the time of great fear, people had run away from the church. And so to see those kinds of things happening in our generation, I believe that that's true. I believe that's what we see. And so we were a country that was a believing country, that we kind of just took it for granted. That God was who God was, and we followed Jesus. And maybe not everybody in a very deep form, but it just was understood. And now we're coming to a different end of the spectrum. Whereas, as I've heard, and I don't know how true this is, but people are coming from different countries to us as mission field. So people are coming here from other countries where there are Christian explosions. And we actually read that Africa is exploding the most. It's one of the biggest Christian nations, and we are on the steady decline.
Yeah. Some people call that a post-Christian culture. And I think that's a good way to name it. And what he means by nominally Christian, well, actually, I think he and I might define nominally Christian. I would define nominally Christian as Christian. Oh, no, I think he and I define it the same. Nominally Christian means Christian in name. It's my experience, and some of the folks on the video mention that when they came to this country, they were surprised that people weren't really Christians, because I think the rest of the world, at least for some time, I don't know if they still do, thinks of America as a Christian country. But when you get here, you recognize it's not. We certainly are not living out Christian beliefs. We're not talking about God and Jesus. We're not foundationally behaving as a Christian culture. Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible. And so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.